Hi, my name is Jennifer Beth, and I am going to be kind of walking you through my final project for English 625, which is Hack the Text for Moby Dick. So my final project is an all-encompassing data entry driven project regarding the illusions and different intertextuality that is involved in Moby Dick. So I started out by collecting a bunch of data regarding all of the different illusions in the text, and then using it to create a map of the text, which kind of shows space and time travel within Moby Dick, which was always something that was very interesting to me, the fact that you could be on the Pequod following this journey all the way over to the Cape of Good Hope and Indonesia and all around the equator in Africa, and still at the same time be over in the United Kingdom, in Spain, in India, and just have this element of time travel and space travel that isn't usually seen in just a regular narrative. And I think it's something that's really interesting is the fact that you're on this ship, the Pequod, and you don't really realize how much you're traveling when you're on the water, or you do see it more so when you're on the water versus when you're having a narrative in one place. You're kind of suspended in space and time when you're on the water, and you're able to see more of the different narrative relationships. And I think Melville really plays this up with kind of hiding his texts in his narrative in the different spaces of it. So to kind of talk you through what I did, this is just like a little basic intro into the kind of final completed project. But to talk through what I actually created, I started off by collecting data about the different illusions. So I collected the chapter number, the date, location of the publication, and then the location of where this happened in Moby Dick, on the Pequod, in New Bedford, in Nantucket, and then I also collected information about the author, and then the actual illusion, which doesn't really appear in my final project. It's just to kind of ground it for myself, so I knew, I'm looking for the story of Jonah when they were in New Bedford. So I took this data, which I used a lot of Wikipedia and just search engines online to kind of find out what he was referencing in here, and created some Google Fusion tables, which is a great feature of Google. You can create this spreadsheet and then map it out in the Fusion table. So how you go about making a Google Fusion table is you create a spreadsheet and make sure that your first row is all your headings and not actual data. And it can be numbers, it can be words, it can be anything that you want to actually collect, just as long as you keep it all the same in the categories. You upload the spreadsheet, and then you're able to create a bunch of different graphics based on this data. So it does most of the grunt work for you, but you actually are sitting there and collecting the data, which takes time as well. So I created quite a few graphics to kind of talk through what my data has been showing us. And my first one is a map of the illusions in the text. So while this is loading, I can kind of talk about, I used this map right here to create the one that I had shown you previously. The great thing about this one is the fact that you can actually interact with it. You can kind of click on the different dots that are placed there based on the locations I put in my spreadsheet, and you can actually zoom in and use it just like Google Maps. You can use a little, street view if you want, but some of these are kind of just like in the ocean, so it's not advised. So you can kind of zoom in on some of these. Oh. and get an actual better idea of where you are. So before you kind of just saw a cluster of dots and it looked like it was all in the same place, but I actually have each of the individual places here along the coast. Some of these are from where Melville left, or Ishmael left, and some of them are from illusions that Melville had. And so you can kind of see there's not as many over in America, and there's a lot more in Europe, in Greece, which you can see a little better when I show you some of the other quantifying graphics, because they show how many times some of these were alluded to. This will just say, London, England, even if there were 30 or 40 allusions to a publication there. So you can kind of click on the dot, and it'll show, this one was chapter 56, the date was 1839, the location that they were in Moby Dick was the Cape of Good Hope, and the publication was The Natural History of Sperm Whale by Thomas Beale, who was a surgeon. So this is a very cool interactive map that you can kind of see. You can't necessarily see the voyage of the Pequod on this one, but you can see, when I'm in London, I'm also in the Pequod over here, which is really great. And another great feature of the Google Fusion tables is some of the filters you can apply. So this is a map, same map, I just haven't saved it yet because I wanted to show how you can create different filters. So you can filter it, right now it's just by location, but you can also add in, I want to filter it by author. And so now you can choose the different authors and see, okay, what about Charles Dickens? And you can see the dots all disappear except for this one. You can add in some more. So you can kind of see this multiplicity of authorship, which is what I really wanted to kind of depict. It's not just Melville who is writing this book, it's also all of these other authors across time and space. And kind of just questioning how much of the words in Moby Dick are actually Melville's. So you can sit there and add them all in, and then it'll look like the other product. So if you don't want to look at authors, you can also do date. And again, you can choose dates in here and add them, and this will change as well. So it's a really great way to kind of see, how many allusions there are and how there's this multiplicity of authorship, as I said before. So the map is a great thing. That's what I had initially set out to create, was a very cool interactive map of Moby Dick. But what else Google Fusion Tables provides are some really great graphics, which kind of quantify some of the questions that I had in Moby Dick with, how many of these works are important to what Melville is writing and where are they occurring. So this map is showing different locations and how many allusions there were. So the location is the actual source of the publication. So here you can see that the most was from London, England, and there were 31 allusions from all of them. There's 148 total, so out of those, 31 were in London, England. And then down to Greece, France, Israel, Judea, Germany, Paris, France, all the way down to Actium. And these ones all with the little dot all just have one. So this says a lot more than just about Moby Dick. This says a lot more just about publication and I think about the canon in general. The most of them were in London, England, and then Greece and France and Israel. And some of these things you can right away see, Israel and Judea, those are going to be some of the ones, and Nineveh is another one that had a lot, had 5. And those are all going to be Bible references. So I can show you a different graphic that'll show you about publication, and the Bible will be the biggest one. And I think just talking about the canon, it shows, what Melville felt was important that people should have read or should have known about at the time, and what that says about, I just think about the English canon. So here is another filter. This one is, again, the location, but this is the location of where where the Pequod was. So I have some of them just as the Pequod because it wasn't in any specific place, and you can just see that most of the illusions occurred in some of these in between places. You know, the Cape of Good Hope, the Philippine Islands, the Bermuda Triangle. These kind of blank spaces, which I talk about in my SOGC. This one shows authors and about how many illusions each of the authors had. So, as you can see here, there were 12 by Moses. Then Greek mythology was the next one. Jeremiah, another prophet. William Shakespeare tied with Jonah. And Baron Cuvier, which he was a scientist who published a lot about cytology. And then John, another apostle who was from the Bible. So as you can see, most of these ones down here are just, had one illusion, and then right here there's a spike to 2, 3, 4, and 5, 6, 8, and then 12. So again, this says a lot about the canon and a lot about authorship, I think. The fact that, there are this many authors that are involved in the text other than just Melville. And this one is publication. As I said before, the highest one is the Bible. It has 37 allusions, followed by Greek mythology, and then the natural history, which is by Baron Cuvier. So it goes from, the Bible to a mythology and then a history. And I think that's interesting that Melville was alluding to the Bible and Bible stories, and then also Greek mythology a lot. And those are just kind of those typical and just well-known stories and texts that a lot of people would have relatability to. So here's another type of graphic. Those were all bar graphs, and here's a pie chart which shows how many locations there were, and this one is again by publication, and there's 5 pages of the different locations that these publications were found in. The most of them, again, London, England, followed by Greece, France, and Israel, and so on and so forth. And I think that's just another way to kind of see this, the same thing I had said before about this space and time travel. And what I like about this graphic is that it just kind of looks like it goes on until infinity, which is just kind of what the whole basis of space and time travel is the fact that you can be in multiple places at once and multiple times at once. And then here's a similar one showing the location of where they were in Moby Dick versus how many times there were illusions there. Now this is a pie chart that you can again see some of the different places and just showing kind of how you can categorize it. So I could do it by author and show how many times. So again, Moses has the most. And it's just a very similar thing to the bar graph, just a different way to kind of see the relationships. Instead of lines, it's, by the pieces of the pie. Now these next ones that I'll be showing you are some cool narrative mapping and network interactives, which I think are really great. They show a different type of relationship, and what I really like about them is the fact that you can move them around, you can interact with them, zoom in, zoom out, and they kind of move, and it looks like they're kind of just like in a little petri dish, which is really cool. So this one is showing the relationship between chapter and the location. So this is a little bit different than what I had shown before. The other ones were showing the number of illusions per location or author. And this one's showing a different type of relationship, connecting nodes of the different chapter numbers and how many places there were. So as you can see, the 2 different colors, the yellow is the chapter number and the blue is the location. And this is the location of publication out of the Pequod. And the thickness of line depicts how many allusions there were to that same place, and the size of the dot shows how many times those were alluded to as well. So starting off, you can kind of zoom in. You saw London, England was the biggest, of course, but what's really great is you can kind of zoom in and see a little bit closer. So you can see, London is at the center of it, even though London, England is never mentioned in Moby Dick. It's, it starts over you'd think there'd be more about New Haven or Nantucket, and Nantucket doesn't actually even appear in the map at all. There were no allusions when Ishmael was in Nantucket, so it's absent completely from this narrative network, and instead London, England is the center, and you can see it just connects to almost every single chapter. And then, moving out, there's Paris, France, and then France, which is the same thing, and that's just a data entry error of my own. And then another England over here. So you can kind of zoom around, and what's great about it is the interactive quality. Again, as I said, you can pick it up, and you can, when you are holding onto one of those nodes, it boldens all of the connections of it, so you can kind of let go, and then it will kind of bounce back, and you'll see all the other networks. But if I want to see everything that's connected to Paris, France, it'll show me, look, there's only 4. So this is kind of showing the importance of location in the narrative, and how space and time travel really is happening within Moby Dick, even if you don't right away see it. And you can see these outliers are places like Pennsylvania, Great Britain, Canaan, Edom, and they're not connected at all to any of these chapters over here. So that's a great example of just how you sometimes don't see things in the text, even though there are these invisible narrative networks. So this one too is a little different. This one's connecting 2 different types of location, and this one's connecting the illusion in blue, the location of that publication, to the location in the novel, which are in yellow. So the Cape of Good Hope. When you're in the Cape of Good Hope, you are also in Germany, London, Israel, Judea, Nantucket, France, Egypt, Netherlands. And I just think that's a great way to show, at this one place in the Cape of Good Hope, you're also in all these other places. And what you can't see here, since you only can choose 2 parameters, you can't also see the time travel as well. So I think that's just like a great way to kind of see these narrative relationships, and how so many of them are just intertwined and creating this kind of web. And then again, there are some outliers, which you have to zoom out to see, which is kind of like what Ishmael talks about a lot with Moby Dick. You never can see the entire whale in its entirety. No one has ever successfully done that. And I think these narrative networks are something that kind of shows a little bit more about that. Like over here, outliers, New Bedford, those ones are not connected to anything else in the text. And this is the origin of the story. It starts in New Bedford, and it's not connected to the rest of this text. So now this network is very similar in that it shows authors and locations in Moby Dick. So where Ishmael was when he made the illusion, and to whom he made the illusion. And this one's showing a lot more circular ones, just because some of these, and lots of bigger ones, so the Philippine Islands, if you look at that, it's connected to all of these. And if you look, some of these have multiple connections. Jeremiah was alluded to in the Philippine Islands, the Straits of Sundra, and then also up here in Java. So it shows kind of these networks that you don't initially see when you're reading a text from start to finish. You don't necessarily have some of these chapters side by side. You're reading it in a chronological order, and this makes it all on one page, where you can see that there's these relationships between the text that you wouldn't have normally seen. And again, over here are some of the outliers. Most of them are the Pequod, and again, that's just kind of a data entry error that could have been fixed with more time. So my final network that I'll be showing, once it loads, is very similar. This one, instead of authors, is by works. So sometimes there were a couple authors, like for example Shakespeare and Moses, who had different texts that they were that they were authors of and were alluded to. So this one shows a little bit more of a I guess, a multiplicity of the authorship. And again, if you look, the center of this is the Bible, which had 37 allusions, and it's connected to all of these different locations. It's at the center of it, which you wouldn't naturally think of Moby Dick being so aligned with the Bible, but if you click it, all of the other ones kind of disappear. So you can kind of see that within Moby Dick there are so many other texts and so much that you necessarily wouldn't see at first, and I think that was something that I really wanted to explore and talk about and find out more about. So I hope that these networks and graphs and charts kind of show you the idea of like this, putting these all into conversation, spanning centuries and decades and so much time and space. You can be in 1850 with Melville, you can be in 1790 with Coleridge and 1600 with Shakespeare, and have them all in conversation, which you necessarily wouldn't have usually, spanning 3 centuries, versus, even going from BC to AD with the Bible and some of the Greek mythology and even some other texts that wouldn't necessarily be put in context with each other. So I think that without meaning to, Melville really created these networks that maybe he wasn't necessarily trying to create, but kind of expose a little bit about his authorship and what he thought was worth reading. So this is, I guess, what I would say the canon according to Melville. For more information about these networks, I have created a little bit of a text in my statement of goals and choices, and then also a short little paragraph after this video that you can read to kind of find out more about the networks that I have created.